So once you finish all your programming, the last thing to do is do your evaluation. Now the evaluation is worth 15 marks, so it's important that you get this section right. The evaluation is about taking a realistic view of how well you've done in the coursework, rather than actually just saying, oh, I'm brilliant, I've done it all well. Okay, so being honest and critical is the key to getting marks in this section. So you need to be able to show how well your system has met the needs of users. So during the entire system, you need to have taken a view that you're trying to solve the problems that you originally set out to solve, that you're trying to make sure this system will work for the users that you identified in the analysis, your stakeholders. A lot of your evaluation you will have actually done already, certainly evidence for it. So your testing, it becomes evidence, your reviews become evidence, your success criteria analysis becomes evidence. So this is going to essentially round up and wrap up your coursework. So you're going to break this down into the following sections. So testing to form evaluation. So this is the testing that happens at the end of the system using your post-development test data. Your evaluation success criteria, which is going to look at each success criteria that you identified in your analysis and actually work out the relative success of each of those. You're going to be looking at the usability of the system and evaluating it, evaluating how maintainable it is, taking the system forward, so someone actually want to maintain it or you want to maintain it in the future. And finally, what possible future updates could there be? And that sometimes could be linked with your limitations and identified analysis. Now, I know I did say there's 15 marks available for evaluation. However, there is 5 marks for testing as well. So the testing to inform evaluation is actually a completely separate section, which is worth 5 marks. And then you got 15 marks for evaluation. So actually this is more than development. So ironically, although you spent more time coding this thing, you get more marks for doing evaluation, which is just a bit bonkers, but there you go, that's OCR. So to be more precise, you need to provide annotated evidence of testing the solution of robustness at the end of the development process, and provide annotated evidence of usability tester user feedback. Okay, so that's what you need to be able to do. So your final prototype testing is essentially testing everything. Now at this point, you will have already tested some features in prototype 1 and 2. However, at the end of the prototype, you need to test everything. We call this regression testing. What we really are getting on at is, well, let's say you coded something in prototype 1 and tested it and left it alone and never thought about it again. Well, what happens if some of the code you added later has broken those original features? Now, you wouldn't know that unless you actually went off and tested everything again. Now you can copy some of the test scripts you had from previous tests if they were good enough, just to show that every single feature is working, and you are genuinely going to have to run these tests again. The best way, the fastest way to do this is simply copy and paste those tests through, do a video of you running through those tests one by one. You can do a voiceover if you want to, and then you can just kind of fill out the table in your testing. So what do we expect for evidence? We need a clear table of tests with evidence of how they were successful, or if not, and any indication of failed tests. Now, if you do have failed tests at this point, you do not have to improve them. You don't have to fix them. Okay. All you have to do is simply say they failed, and in evaluation, you need to talk about it. Okay, so it's okay to have failed tests. I mean, if you know your system works, that's a bad thing, but if you've got 1 or 2 things that just couldn't get right, that's absolutely fine. It's not a problem at all. In fact, we expect it because you are sixth formers and you've only had a short amount of time to build this system. You're not going to have a perfect system. Okay, no one will. So that's absolutely fine for things to fail. In order to give you evidence of how usable your system is, the easiest and the fastest way to do so is to get someone to give you feedback. Now, I'm calling this a feedback meeting. However, it can just be a family member or someone you can talk to who will be willing to give you feedback on your system. Now, it is important that the person is critical. Okay, you don't want someone just say, that's brilliant, well done. You want someone to say, well, that's really good. However, I think if you improve this bit or change this bit, it would be even better still. Okay, so you need people to be critical, to give you feedback. It's important to take a user approach, story approach to get the person who's testing your system out to go through each of the features and get them to complete tasks on it. So you might even want to write those tasks down first so they know exactly what they're doing. And it's also worthwhile recording the meeting. Maybe you can video it, maybe you can record it using kind of voice capture systems and get it to transcribe it for you, because then you can just whack it straight into your coursework. Now, this kind of user feedback isn't technically fully needed, okay? However, when you are evaluating your usability features, it just gives you lots of evidence. So for example, if you think you've got really good user interface and you've got someone to critically come along and say, well, actually, this is all really good. However, I think these would make even better. Well, you've then got something to talk about. You can say, well, actually, for the most part, they really enjoyed the user interface. They found it easy to find the key features. However, they did say this needs improving, and I agree with that statement. I think if this improved it would make it even better because of these reasons. Okay, so you can actually then take that evidence and actually evaluate it and talk about it. So the more detailed this this meeting is, the more you can talk about in your evaluation. So what I've got here is kind of like a suggestion. It is probably a little bit overkill. However, as I said, the more detail you get, the better. So having an agenda, listing out key areas you're going to focus on, the key features of your system will really help. List the key questions such as how easy was it to find feature X? What would you rate the usability of this, the easiness of it? Did it crash? Did you find any bugs? Was there anything you found difficult to use? You know, those kind of key questions. Listing out what the user has said as a little transcription or summary, again, will help you provide evidence later on. So here's the marks for testing. Now, obviously, we're only interested in top marks. So looking at top marks, provided annotate evidence of post-development testing for function and robustness. Now, for function, it basically means you've tested every single feature. So that's why if you go through your prototypes, copy and paste those test scripts that you've already used, that's going to be enough evidence for function. Robustness, however, what we're really looking for is, have you tested it to death? And you've kind of over tested it. So tested every single validation rule, tested every single possible thing you can think of. Okay, in order to get the mark for this one, and here's 1 mark, so some people just don't bother, you do have to really show good testing at this point. Okay, provided annotated evidence for usability testing, that's where the usability comes into it, and essentially that's your feedback from users. Okay, so if you've got that and you've annotated that well, bang, that's that mark. Okay, so actually it's really easy to get 4 marks in this section without really trying too hard. So, as I've said, to get 4 marks in this system, ensure you've tested the following for every single input into your system. So valid, invalid, and boundary tests. So valid test, the normal test data you can expect, more than 1 as well. Okay, so 1 test does not cut it. You need to have at least 2 or 3 tests for every input. Invalid tests, to make sure you are making sure those validation rules have been kicked off, and boundary tests, because most bugs happen on boundaries. Okay, so if you've got a system where it's got a maximum size of 20 characters that you can enter in, test for 20, test for 21, does it still work? Screenshot evidence as well. Make sure that if anything you have done will change the database, i.e. you've added a new user to a system through a form maybe, you take a screenshot of the database to show it's actually worked. Making sure that every single user story is clearly tested, okay, so not just a few of them, absolutely everyone you've coded. Any additional tests that you think are important to actually get through that, and also any extra tests that you need because your test data has changed. Getting users to test it, so maybe doing beta testing, get feedback from them, showing failed tests and maybe fixing them, but you don't have to fix them, and also showing your solutions are robust by testing everything you possibly think about. Now get into the nuts and bolts of the evaluation. The success of the solution is the biggest part of evaluation. It's the most important part as well. What you are going to do is you're going to go back to analysis. In analysis, if you did a really good job in analysis, you should have a list of success criteria. If you don't have success criteria analysis, go back and make it. Okay, there's absolutely no way you can evaluate this system and get the successful solution done properly without those success criteria, because otherwise the examiner is going to be kind of going, okay, I'm not really sure what makes a successful project because you've not told me. So it's absolutely crucial you get success criteria correct. Once you have got success criteria, you take each and every one of them and put them into a subsection. Okay, have a paragraph for every single success criteria. Now, this seems like overkill. However, this way you are guaranteed to get the marks. Okay, take each success criteria and find evidence from testing. Okay, now what I mean by that is success criteria should be linked to some features. Okay, because that's what they're there for in the first place. You should, if you've done your testing correctly, have tested that feature and got evidence that you test that feature. That evidence should show that that either works or does not work. You need to cross-reference it. When I say cross-reference, what I mean is you must write down which test it passed. Okay, it's not good enough to say my testing showed it passed. That's not cross-referencing. That's just simply saying it passed. Okay, you need to say this feature worked well, as you can see from test 4 to 6. This showed the valid test working. I also tested the validation rules in this feature, as can be seen by tests 8 and 9. Okay, so you must do that. Now, to make your life easier, if you number your tests, it just makes cross-referencing a walk in the park. If you have done testing well, this really should be easy. Okay, that cross-reference should be really easy. The other thing to talk about is user feedback. So if your users have talked about that feature or it's a usability feature in the first place, then use the evidence from it. So as you see, and quote your user. Okay, that again will show you cross-referencing. It is important that you are honest about whether you met that criteria, you didn't meet that criteria, or you partially met it. Now, when I say partially met, what I mean by that is that it kind of met it, however, it wasn't perfect. Now, you might have written, I don't know, a game, and this game works, you know, you can play it, but it's not like the kind of stuff you might be downloading from the App Store or buying on your PlayStation 4. And because of that, it's not perfect. And I'm using that word perfect really clearly, because if you've met a criteria, you must have really met it. If there's any room for doubts, it's only partially met. And partially met criteria mean you can talk about it a lot more, because you can say this part of the criteria I've done, however this bit I haven't, and then that becomes part of your evaluation. So let's see what makes a poor evaluation. Okay, and generally I've seen these loads of times. So maybe the feature was your player can move. This was met as my test showed the player can move. Now that's a terrible evaluation. Hopefully you can see why. First of all, no cross-referencing. It's not showing me where the evidence is that it can move. It's not talked to me about how well that works or doesn't work, whether actually that's quite, did the user think that it moves smoothly? Was the usability right? So let's look at better. Play can move. My feature testing showed that the play could move in all directions. Now straight away I've put a bit more detail in there off the bat. It was responsive and the rate of movement enabled you to avoid enemies well. Test 1 to 4 evidence this feature. However, user feedback brought up the issue of not being able to go diagonally. Although I did not intend for the user to move this way, feedback suggested that this will make the game more playable. Comparing to similar games from my analysis, which could also move diagonally, I could see that this would improve the playability. As such, this criteria was only partially met. Now, notice I brought together evidence from more than one place. Okay, I brought evidence from the users, what the user said about it. I brought evidence from my testing, and I've clearly referenced my testing. I've conceded that maybe this wasn't perfect. Okay, there was an issue with it, and actually I brought then my analysis, okay, where I've looked at existing apps and actually realized, you know, the existing apps did it, but I didn't. So it couldn't have been a perfect system. So this is the kind of detail and quality we are looking for in the evaluations. Actually, not just simply saying it worked or it didn't work, actually saying how well did it work. So how to evaluate it? Ensure that your feature is well tested first. Okay, if you've not tested it well, go back and test it. Make sure you've got some user testing on it as well. Get users to have a go at it, get them to talk about it, and you make a note of that. If you haven't done that, go back and do it. Ensure that user testing, you get criticism as well as praise. Okay, please don't just find someone who says it's lovely, because it won't help you in this section. Ensure you consider any issues, no matter how small, and why they would make a difference. Okay, so be critical. Don't just simply say it's wonderful, magic. Be critical. We are looking for a critique, okay, because we can see by reading your coursework up to this point and actually looking at the code where the problems are, okay? And if you don't acknowledge them, we know you're not critiquing properly, okay? So make sure you do that. Backup statements with evidence. If it didn't go well, how can you prove it to the moderator? How can you prove that your system is, or that feature is perfect? Be specific to referencing, quote feedback, link back to specific tests, number your tests so it's nice and clear. That way we can find the evidence that you are talking about. So in the maintenance and future development sections, you are talking about how your code is maintainable. So this section feels a bit fuzzy, but what you have to do really simply is talk about how can you fix bugs in the future. Imagine you release this application and someone then downloaded it and used it, and after a while people started finding bugs. How easy will it be to fix those bugs? Now that might seem a bit of a hypothetical situation because we don't know what bug they're going to fix. It might be a hard bug, an easy bug, but actually there are things you put into your system to make your code easier to maintain. For example, comments. If you've commented your code, then someone else taking the code on will be able to read those comments and understand what your code is doing. So if you've commented it well and you sent up variable names and all those kind of things, it'll be easy for them to do that. Your modular design, your classes, your objects, your functions. If you have kind of created a function which is one feature, another function which is another feature, and you've done that modular design, then if a bug happens in one of those features, well, they can go straight to that function and fix it. Okay, so it's going to be a lot easier for them to maintain it. If you've got all your code in one massive big function or one massive big chunk, then obviously it's going to be much harder to maintain. So you can talk about how easy it is to maintain it by focusing in on, well, how well have you decomposed it in the first place, how have you used object-oriented programming, have you used functions, and how easy it is to fix a bug in a feature. Then we've got our future development. So future developments are things you're going to implement later on, okay, or you could implement it. These are going to be things which will improve the system overall. Now these might be limitations you've already identified, which you can then fix, or it might be actually brand new features you've not actually considered yet. When you are talking about future developments, do say how they could be implemented rather than just simply saying what they could be. And when you're saying how they can be implemented, talk about what changes you'd have to make to your code. If you start talking about what changes you can make to your code, this provides extra evidence that your system is maintainable. So for example, if I'm going to introduce a brand new screen, do I have to completely change 4 or 5 different classes to get it working, or do I just add a brand new class, change a couple of lines, done? Okay, so how easy is it to add new features? How easy is it to change existing features? So that becomes part of maintenance future development. So these two really do, although they are separate sections, they do pull from each other. So when suggesting a new feature, you need to be clear where it can be added. So talk about exactly what classes need to be changed. Talk about what classes you have to add. You need to have a clear discussion of how your modular design allows that change to be made. So if you, for example, file the model view controller and you need to add in a brand new screen, well, you're changing the view, aren't you? Okay, so how can those views be adapted? And the fact you've used model view controller means you don't have to change the database, you don't have to change your business logic, you just simply whack in a brand new view. So here's the marks of evaluation. Now, if you want these marks a bit more detail, you can simply go onto the OCR website, download the spec, and it's right at the bottom of the spec as an appendix. But to get 50 marks, if you follow all the things in this video, you'll pretty much get there. So, for example, using test data to cross-reference your evaluations, making sure that you talk about partially or unmet features, saying how those could be implemented in your further developments, considering maintenance issues, describe how the program could be developed to deal with limitations in the future, and making sure that you've got a clear and logical discussion. Everything you have provided is relevant, and essentially making sure that it makes sense.